Hey, everybody, Mark Herman, a.k.a. LA Bengals fan on most of the major platforms, and I'm joined here with Jake Sirkus from the Jake Sirkus podcast, and this is the Combine Recap, Free Agency Preview, Franchise Tag, Jungle Talk. Yeah, all right, so here we go. So, Jake, before I forget, tell them where they can find all your stuff.
Yeah, follow me on Twitter at Jake Circus. That's Sirkus. I'm sure it'll be in the description here somewhere. But yeah, that's where most of my Bengal stuff, NFL stuff, more so now that season's over. And then my podcast on Spotify, Jake Circus Podcast. It's mostly college basketball right now, as March Madness is pretty much underway. But yeah, draft stuff will happen. I'm gonna have a couple big time interviews over the next month, so look out for those on Spotify.
Oh, excellent. Okay. Yeah. Any a tease on who it is, or just they'll be big time?
Uh, a I think he's pretty well known, but he is an NFL insider. He's going to come on in the next 2 weeks or so.
Good.
Probably next week after free agency.
Okay, excellent. So just to refresh everybody's memory, I think legal tampering starts Monday. Actual free agency opens on Wednesday, and we'll see where we're at. We're going to go through everything like we always do. Before I forget, if you don't subscribe, please subscribe. It's all we ask. So hit the bell, get the alerts. We'll be putting stuff up, especially with free agency, where it's going to be kind of fluid on when we do stuff. So on how they play free agency. If we have a big splash signing, we're going to get a show out. But if not, we're going to wait until there's more news. So we'll go through. We're going to, I'm a little under the weather, so I'm going to be leaning on Jake today. We're going to go through, got a little bit of news. We'll wrap up the combine, talk about Burrow's contract extension, and then free agents we should be looking at or might be looking at, or so we'll get into all that. First thing, Mixon, what's with this? Now his house was a crime scene, and then it was, or part of the crime scene, but it turns out that it was a trainer on the same street that called the police, and his house was just in the neighborhood. I don't know what's going on. It's too bad. In a year where we're looking at running back, and Mixon is one of those places where we could save on the cap space, it's a shame that these two stories have happened, So just bad timing. It doesn't look like it's anything again, but once again, not good timing. When you're on the bubble, so to speak, when you're one of those cap casualty candidates. We re-signed a couple of our own. Joe Bashi to a 1-year deal, and Jalen Davis to a 2-year deal. So just taking care of some of the little things so they don't hit free agency. And obviously, no surprise here, we didn't tag anybody. So I don't know if you want to piggyback on any of those, or
There were some Bengals fans talking about tagging Pratt a couple weeks ago. That was never going to happen. It's kind of he's gone. They're never. I think this is like the Bengals are the team that like there are a lot of teams that rarely use the franchise tag, and the Bengals have only used it twice, I want to say, in the last couple, like 5-6 years. Had that weird year with AJ Green when they like refused to let him leave and then he didn't play at all. They tagged him, and then obviously they had to tag Jesse last year. That was kind of obvious. It worked out. I mean, I thought he played fine last year under the tag, and now he's going to be on his way. But they're never going to franchise a lineman, a linebacker in that scenario when he's kind of already has a half foot out the door
right,
since the season ended, kind of
right.
thing.
No, I agree. When we do franchise tag somebody, it almost never leads to a long-term deal while he's in the franchise period. You think about Michael Johnson, we let him walk. We ended up re-signing him later. But typically when we franchise guys, it's kind of like the Bates scenario where they're going to play out that 1 year, give us one more year of service that we need from them, and then we're going to replace them. So that's why Bates is gone. That's our typical MO with franchise tags, is they don't get a deal. That's the one last year with us. Let's touch a little bit about Burrow's contract extension. And the reason I bring this up is yesterday, I don't know if you saw it, but there was a tweet that Burrow got a $1 billion extension, that his new contract was $1 billion for 15 years. It was actually retweeted by a lot of people, including Bengal Jib, with breaking news as their headlines and stuff. And then you went back, and I think the person later the next day said, wow, I really did realize that my tweet was going to get that much traction. I mean, it literally had like 1,500 views and 400 likes. And I mean, it got a lot of traction. Completely false. I didn't see anything that said that the Bengals had re-signed Burrow. Would have loved to have had the news. But but that was it. How do you think, like with the Daniel Jones, we did have the Daniel Jones contract done. How do you think Daniel Jones got 4 years, 160? So with about half of it guaranteed. So I don't know. Obviously, Burrow's contract's going to be richer. I don't know how the Daniel Jones things impacts it. I understand the 50% guarantee, but it's a smaller number. Only 160. So any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I don't think the Daniel Jones thing really has any effect on Burrow. At first, I was like, "What the fuck is this?" And because then it was like $80 million guaranteed. They gave him 40 million AAV. Now the AAV is still there, but he's not getting $40 million in year one and year two. They're gonna maneuver it, and they haven't even announced it yet. But his year one cap hit's 19 million. So they didn't do a horrible job. It looks like structuring the deal, but what they're saying is we think Daniel Jones is good enough where we're gonna maximize the cap with still him at a low number and sacrifice having, during year 3 and year 4 when there's no guaranteed money, having a upwards of a $30 million dead cap hit
Right.
if we cut him in 2 years. So that's the risk they're taking. Now, I don't think Daniel Jones is good enough to be taking that risk, but they do, and they have them giving him this contract confirms what they have said and quietly said about him for the last 4 years is that they want any excuse or reason to convince themselves to give Daniel Jones a second contract. And I think the same thing can be said about what the Ravens did with Lamar, is that they have been really not open, but it's kind of been obvious how they feel about Lamar, that they love him, but they are perfectly fine letting him walk if they cannot come to an agreement of the contract that Baltimore is comfortable giving him. And that's why they gave him the exclusive franchise tag, which almost never gets used anymore in the National Football League. And it turned a lot of heads. People were like, well, what is this? And then it's the same thing as a restricted free agent in the NBA, where you can match an offer sheet.
Right.
And he can negotiate with teams open, which is exactly what Lamar has wanted. I feel like this whole time he's always wanted to be curious of what the other 31 teams would offer him if he hits the open market, because the mold of the NFL is if you hit the open market, you're going to get more money because there's more teams bidding on you. And all it takes is 2 or 3 teams to get into a bidding war, and boom, you're 35-40% above market value just by hitting free agency. Now, that's probably what's going to happen with Lamar, and it's very possible that Baltimore is not going to want to sign that offer sheet and keep him, and they're going to be perfectly fine getting 2 first-round picks.
Oh, yeah.
I think a team like Detroit and Houston, well, Houston more so, has absolutely no reason to not go after Lamar because they have the money to do so, and Lamar's a proven MVP type player. They can just stay on the field. And if, let's say, Houston trades down trade if they stay at 2 and they sign Lamar, and boom, Baltimore's going to be right there at number 2, and they're probably going to take CJ Stroud or Anthony Richardson. And that's a very clear possibility. But both those, I think both those decisions that were made, and the Saints signed Derek Carr, which I think is hilarious because they're not really any good, but the 2 quarterback decisions that were made the other day, I thought one team was thinking about their future the right way, and that was Baltimore, and the other team, the Giants, did not.
Okay. And I've also seen Rich Eisen did a whole show yesterday about Lamar to Washington, saying, hey, if you're Daniel Snyder, why not, do this right before you leave rather than letting the next owner come in and sign Lamar and get the credit. So like I said, it was a lot of reasons why Washington might be in play. Also because Daniel Snyder doesn't care if he's being forced to sell. Hell, guarantee him $200 million. Who cares, right? It's going to be the next owner's problem, the guarantee. So and that way he could be the hero if it works out, right? Even though he wouldn't be the owner. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. But definitely, I think the Ravens, that was the smart move. I still question what how he's being received by the team and in the locker room. It's just unusual for a player to not ever be on the sidelines when you're hurt. Why wasn't he? And he wasn't at the game. It's just a really weird optic. There's something else going on there. So, and then we'll see how everything else falls out. Like you said, Derek Carr's gone. So Jimmy G, is he plan B for the Jets if they don't get Rodgers? Raiders, Texans, Panthers, so we'll see how all that plays out. The one thing that was interesting about the false tweet on Burrow was, and I've said this for the last year and a half, was it had a part ownership of the team, a small percentage component in it. And I've said that for the last year and a half, that the Bengals don't have a $500 million to stick in a guaranteed account. So, one of those things would be that was something that I had said before, that they're going to have to get creative. So it's interesting that the fake tweet had that little bit of creativity in it. But we'll see how it all plays out. I know we're all dying for news. Something's going on behind the scenes, and we'll wait till it happens. Let's wrap up on the combine. James Rapian gave out a list of the players that the Bengals met with. Obviously, they met with all the tight ends. They met with a lot of the running backs. Probably not the top one. Anything that stood out to you in the combine in terms of players that we met with? Anybody we should be looking at in particular?
In terms of players we met with, the corners, I don't remember if they met with Porter, but I know they met with Ringo. Both Porter and Ringo, who are very possible first-round targets in the secondary, had great weekends. Ringo 9.61 RAS. This is on a 1 to 10 scale, and then Porter was 5th among all corners with a 9.63 RAS. So, I mean, these guys are just athletic freaks. Porter is a guy who's really big. Really quick, long arms, a guy that I could easily see the Bengals going after, because we talked about it last week. They kind of need to draft a corner in the first 2 rounds. I don't think they're going to sign one. I think a guy like Mike Hughes from Detroit would make sense. I know some of the allbengals.com guys were on that a couple of weeks ago, previewing free agency. They mentioned Mike Hughes, and I was like, yeah, that makes sense. Then I looked about it. I looked into it a little deeper, and he's a veteran. He's still got some legs left. He's been on a few teams in the last couple of years, but it's a good locker room guy, it seems like, and would make sense. But I think that you have a solid guy in Cam Taylor-Britt, who's on a rookie deal. You have Chidobe Awuzie, who's coming off an ACL tear and is now on a contract here. Mike Hilton's under contract for 2 more years, but he plays in the slot. Eli Apple's probably leaving unless they can figure something out with him, but he's kind of crazy now. He's kind of going off the rails, so I don't truly know what he thinks he's worth. But the Bengals do. The Bengals, trust me, the Bengals know exactly what Eli Apple's worth. He's worth exactly what they gave him the last 2 years, and that's just
exactly. Listen, he was a journeyman for a reason, and he's been adequate. Right. But he's not going to get the big deal. And if there's another team that will overpay for him, we're not going to do that for Apple. So
yeah, Brian Breesy, who I don't know if the Bengals met with, but he's a potential target if he falls. 907 RAS. None of the targets that the Bengals were looking at really faltered or just had bad weekends. Darnell Washington a 985. Michael Mayer a little underwhelming, 808. Dalton Kincaid's not on here, so that's a little surprising. But pretty much everyone that they were looking at, they did meet with him.
Yeah.
Michael Mayer's probably the guy. There's a guy from Iowa. I forgot his name. Oh, not Michigan.
Laporta.
Laporta, and then the Michigan guy, Schoonmaker, 975. So really good weekend for him. He was 3rd amongst tight ends, right behind Darnell Washington, and then Luke Musgrave from Oregon State. So tight ends, corners, deep classes. Probably the first, 2nd round pick. I don't see them taking a lineman. I just don't see a world where that's the best player available.
Right, I agree. Because of where we're drafting, we're not going to get. We'll be reaching for somebody at our draft pick if we draft a lineman that's left. So
I know a lot of Ohio State guys are pounding the table for what's his name, DeJuan Jones. I know a lot of Bengals fans are looking at him. Darnell Wright from Tennessee would certainly be probably my choice if he falls. I'm gonna have a pretty high grade on him. Yeah, but offensive tackles they always go earlier than we expect them to.
They won't be there.
And I agree.
Yeah,
but
look at last year. We wanted Linderbaum, and he went to the Ravens before us. But
he went way early.
They just don't make it where we are.
Wide receivers and tackles, if there's only a select few number of top guys, they all are going to go very early, because those are the positions that you have to keep recycle drafting year after year. And the Bengals are now in that spot with a now big time quarterback, big time receiver. You got to keep, reloading those important key role player positions with corner and tackle. And but I do see them drafting a tight end. I think they're going to re-sign Hurst, and either draft tight end in the first, second, or third round. And there's a bunch of guys, it's very deep class, guys who
Yes.
tested off the charts. Laporter, Schoonmaker, some of those. These Big Ten tight ends don't mess around, and the Bengals have never had one. So it'd be certainly a new wrinkle having a young tight end, not Drew Sample, who can actually run routes and catch.
Right.
If they were to go that route as early as day 2, which they did a few years ago, and it didn't work because they drafted the completely wrong guy.
No, we've done really good, especially day 2 with the second and third rounders. So, but I definitely think corner or tight end first round, and then whatever we didn't take in the first, we'll take in the second. And the draft is going to dictate it. And maybe a tackle slides, but if not, I really see. That's why I don't think we'll sign a corner in free agency. I think we're figuring we're going to get one in the first or second round. So
they've only messed up 2 day 2 picks in the Zach Taylor era. The Drew Sample pick was terrible.
Yes.
And then the Jackson Carman pick was even worse.
But the Jackson Carman pick may turn out to be okay because he started to show flashes at his old position. He played much better at the end when he was moved over. So the jury's out on Jackson Carman. And in terms of banging the table on Ohio State guys, I'll remind all the Ohio State fans about Price. Okay, banging the table, and look what Price turned out to be. So the only reason I don't hate him is because we turned him into BJ Hill. So I'm okay with it. But so
I have never once thought that Jackson Carman is a starting tackle in the NFL. When they made the pick, it didn't make any sense. That's not it.
We're going to see how it plays out. But yes, they definitely, it's a gamble, but the jury's still out on him. Whatever the case is, he'll have been a better pick than Price was at 1. So, I mean, he will contribute more to the team than Price did in his entire career with us. So, I just want to remind everybody, this is also the season of misinformation. We have drafted a lot of guys that we never met with. We never met with them. We didn't see them at the combine because they were our number 1 guy. And if they fell to us, we were going to go after them. So ever since we lost Cedric Ellis to New Orleans, we lost Ragnow to Detroit. We pretty much have kept
the Ragnow one still pisses me off.
Oh,
man.
It hurts. I love it. And so ever since then we've done, so we're really good. So like I said, don't always rely on who we bring in, who we see, because there might be somebody that was our number 1 and we're not bringing them in for a reason. And just like teams talk up players that they have no intention of keeping because they're trying to, create a trade market for them. So it's the season of misinformation and getting teams to pick players, so that somebody else falls to you. That's the season we're in. So just remember that.
The horseshoe goes both ways too, because we have missed out on a lot of guys who went right before us. But Bengals were picking between 2 players at 33rd overall in 2020. It was between Denzel Mims and T. Higgins, and the Packers could have easily taken T. Higgins, which would have forced the Bengals to take Denzel Mims, and they would have ran to the podium to submit that pick if T. Higgins wasn't there. That's how much they love T. Higgins.
Right.
So fortunately for us,
Higgins
was still there.
With the way the draft flows, everybody just assumed Rodgers was going to get Higgins as a target, and the Bengals couldn't believe he was there when they started, round the first pick of round 2 the next day. So yeah, exactly it. That's why I don't like to do mocks. I like to talk generally about positions of players because it's a fluid situation. You just don't know. Same thing with free agency. We don't know who's going to woo everybody. Last year we snagged a lot of guys last couple years because we had Burrow helping recruit, and there were guys that came into Cincinnati were supposed to go on to other teams that we signed before they left. It's just a fluid situation. So let's see how everything plays out. In terms of our next show, it's going to be how the news goes. So it might be end of next week. It might be early next week, depending on if there's news. If not, it'll be the following week. So don't freak out. We are watching it. We're waiting for something big to talk about. So Jake, I know you got to run. Remind everybody where your stuff is.
Twitter at Jake Sirkus, Sirkus, Jake Sirkus Podcast. If you want some March Madness content. And then look out for those interviews coming soon. He's been on the podcast before, so you'll be able to figure it out. I've only interviewed 1 or 2 big time guys, but you'll be able to figure it out. And then I'm gonna make a prediction. I think one of our next 2 shows, I think we're gonna have some quarterback extension news to talk about. That's my prediction.
Good. I would love to do it. Obviously, we all know who it would be, so let's hope for some positive stuff. Yeah, like I said, if you don't subscribe, please subscribe. It's all we ask. You can always find Jake's link to me. I've always got our latest episode pinned, and Jake's link to his Twitter feed is always pinned to my profile, LA Bengal fan on Twitter. So go ahead and check it out. And we will be back as the news dictates. With that, I'm going to say, hoot, everybody. Take care.